When you look at the dragons, what do you see? It's important. What do you see?
I suppose I see us.
Tell me.
Everyone says Targaryens are closer to gods than to men. But they say that because of our dragons. Without them, we're just like everyone else.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They're a power man should never have trifled with. One that brought Valyria its doom. If we don't mind our own histories, it will do the same to us. Targaryen must understand this to be king. Or queen.
And we are back for another episode of the wrap-up as we are covering House of the Dragon Season 2 during the summer. And joining me today is, as always, my co-host for the show, Evan Harris.
Glad to be back. Yeah, this is exciting. This was an interesting episode. I thought we were going to be in for a little bit of tease of a battle, and that we did. No big battles yet. That's episode 4. But I loved how many new characters we got. The scope seems to be widening as we lead into this inevitable conflict, and I'm excited. This was a pretty solid episode.
Yeah, I think solid is the perfect way to sum it up. Definitely not my favorite, probably the weakest of the three.
I would have to agree. It's between this and episode 1 for sure.
Yeah, it feels like it feels like with this episode they're finally kind of like starting to get their feet wet, like exploring like that classic pacing of Game of Thrones where it wasn't just 2 locations or like 2 set of families that we would follow. There would be like multiple storylines at once. And we're finally getting that with now that Daemon is in Harrenhal. We're gonna see like obviously the Dragonstone. Rhaena is gonna be sent to the Vale, and obviously the stuff with King's Landing and everything else. So I feel like the show so far with this episode is like barely kind of getting the what would be a good way to describe it, like a good sense of how to balance all of these storylines. It's not a bad episode. It's a really good episode, but again, it's pretty solid.
Really good episode. But yeah, last week we were gifted with like incredible pacing and just a smart back and forth between the High Towers and Rhaenyra's camp. And you could really kind of see the balance shifting in both sides. It was a very clean pace, clean editing. This one, you're right. It's getting to that Game of Thrones territory in a sense that we're seeing so many different characters, so many different arenas, introducing new characters, introducing new conflicts as we head into the main conflict. And because of that, it was just a lot of like, okay, as a non-book reader myself, I'm just like, okay, who is this? What's going on here? Trying to get my bearings, while last week was more so just pretty simple, but executed perfectly. This one is all over the place, but not in a bad way. It was just that like, okay, we're back right near his camp. And then here's Daemon, and then here's Alicent, and then it was like all over the place. It wasn't as cleanly edited or paced as last week's, but overall, I'm with you. Overall, solid episode, a lot to dive into. And, the first 2 episodes, we were kind of like, okay, we can easily split this up between the greens and the blacks. This one, I don't know.
Over soon.
What?
That's going to be over soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very hard to split this episode up and, these conflicts up. I took a lot of notes just so I can get my, again, bearings straight about like what happened. Who are these new characters? Are these people kind of important? So it was very interesting. But I think an overall theme of tonight's episode, or last night's episode, was inevitability in terms of this conflict, which is something that's been petered out throughout episode 1, 2, and 3. So it is kind of getting repetitive, like, oh, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
It's teasing. Yeah.
It's a lot of teasing. And this episode was a lot of teasing for stuff we already knew. But it was teasing through just through another unique lens. Like the inevitability of it all was very unique.
It's a little bit more like, not a global scale, but like it's not just affecting the High Towers or the Targaryens. It's going to affect everybody. And before we choose which camp we want to discuss first, I think we can start with like the opening scene of this show, episode, because I think it's very important and it ties to a lot of the things that the Greens and the Blacks discuss in this episode of generational violence and how no matter how a war gets started, like I love like that speech in the beach as they're like burying the Cargyle twins that between Rhaenys and Rhaenyra, about like once this war is over, like hundreds of years in the future, like what's gonna be the thing that everybody agrees started the war? Was it Luke's death? Was it the beheading of Jaehaerys? Was it Luke taking out Aemon's eye? Like it's not gonna matter at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that's symbolized really well with like the Blackwood and Bracken's feud, because like also like in kind of like in the show, in the books, and they discuss it in the show in this episode, is like nobody really knows how their feud started. It's just there and it's not gonna go away anytime soon. But I think again, like it's a really great way to like to open the episode, because now we've been seeing how like this like kind of like history of violence within House Targaryen, but now that is like going into like other houses, and like at the end of the day, like somebody like House Blackwood and like Bracken, like yeah, they picked sides, but at the end of the day, like they've always had this feud, and now they're using this civil war from other families to justify their own killings. So again, I think it's really cool and how like that is explored like throughout this episode.
It's really smart and it's really important to really sum up like the chaos and the bloodshed that is this, Targaryen civil war in general. Like you said, I think it was very important as well. This episode is called like the Battle of the Windmill. And
the burning of the mill or something like that.
Burning of the mill, yeah. And I think one important and interesting thing that I saw on repeat was that like this windmill kind of represents the cycle of violence. It's constantly, it's spinning, powered by the wind. And in this case, the Civil War, this violence, these dominoes of violence are fueled by other inevitable cycles of violence. And I think Simon Strong kind of also adds to this, adds to this tragedy by saying like sin begets sin begets sin begets sin. Like nobody really knows, nobody really cares. It's just like more sin against kin, against others, and it's going to continue spiraling all throughout the realm. It's a dominoes of violence turning into a cycle of violence that we'll see all the way leading up to our, original Game of Thrones. It's never really going to stop.
Yeah, and I also like that the initial fight that we see, it's just between essentially like teenagers, which again, like I think also like connects back to the very first episode of the show, to the pilot of Rhaenys and Corlys having this conversation during the tourney in episode 1, where they're or like all of these people have never gone to war. They're just like pretending like they're like all of these like badass warriors when like they haven't actually seen a war. And
I don't know.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I feel like doesn't get highlighted enough in the finale of season 1 is like Aemon losing control of Vhagar and resulting in the death of Luke isn't just like a way to like represent that the Targaryens don't really fully have control of the dragons, but I think what gets missed is that it's basically these two teenagers just having a feud, and like they've never gone to war, and like Aemon was trying to like fuck around and find out,
Great point. Yeah.
So like for example, like I don't see somebody like Rhaenys or Daemon losing control of their dragons, but like but like these younger dragon riders, like they haven't seen war. They're not experts in like being like, there are dragon riders, but like they're not like on the level of like Daemon, who have actually gone to war. So again, like I really like that aspect of the Blackwoods and the Brackets, of like these two teenagers who like they've never gone to war, and they're just like gonna end up dead because of what? Honor.
Yeah, that's a common theme that we've seen all throughout these first 3 episodes as war is looming, is that these younger adolescent men most of the time are really eager for conflict. I made a note of it, but every episode so far, Jace is eager to avenge the death of his brother Luke, and he's kind of fidgeting behind the scenes, subtly so, but it's it's there, it's visible that he's really itching for war. Aegon, of course, most of all, war it is. Then it's like, Aegon, I really wish we could show you a clip of what we saw, that jump cut to that horrifying thousands of people dead. If Aegon saw that, he'd be sitting in his Iron Throne, shitting bricks. He does not want to experience that. But these young people are really eager for war, and that transcends to the Dragon Riders, where this episode also kind of brought to the table, let's bring dragons into this war and the kind of back and forth there, the danger of bringing dragons to war. Why? Not because dragons are like these big nuclear threats, but because the dragon riders are, like you said, young. And like, Aemond, Aegon, these are young people. Jace, very young as well. Who are the other dragon riders? Like, you have Bela, but then you have like all these little smaller dragon eggs. Like, these are, Joffrey has a dragon. 6-year-old Joffrey has a dragon. So it's just like, a lot of these dragon riders are young kids. They're not really experienced people. And that's an even bigger danger than the dragons themselves, is the riders who have no control of said dragons. A lot of young people haven't controlled these atomics. It's not looking good. Yeah. Which is going to make next week's episode so interesting, because again, we're going to be seeing Aemond. We're going to be seeing maybe Bela as well. I'm not sure. I saw the preview like one time. But I saw dragons, and I'm like, dragon riders, these young dragon riders. What are these people going to get up to? I'm very curious.
I think next week, all of these characters, not just our main characters, but like the side characters, like the council people, they're also eager to like, just send the dragons, just send the dragons.
I'm like, okay.
I think they're gonna get a reality check next week after they see what happens when dragons go to war.
Exactly. I love how Rhaenys is a very smart character, and in turn, she's kind of trying to lead Rhaenyra down her line of thinking as well, in terms of like, if there's anything you can do, try your best to do something. Because, these people in the council, they don't know about the dangers of dragons. And, Rhaenys has a lot of experience about the dance of the dragons, or the dangers of the dragons, and the dangers of when they go to battle, and innocents usually die.
Sometimes by the hand of Rhaenys too. But
exactly. Yeah. Rhaenys happened to that. What's your kill count, Rhaenys?
But yeah, where do you want to go? You want to go to Greens, Harrenhal, Dragonstone?
I mentioned before we start going across the globe here, they did edit the tapestry this time around.
You saw Jaehaerys, right, or something?
Yeah, Jaehaerys' head. You saw a little gold slither go through his neck, showing the death of Jaehaerys from Blood and Cheese in episode 1. And then as well, like the blood of the rat catchers as well. I thought that was very interesting. Like, the rat catchers was not a funny gag, because it was very tragic last week, but stemming from the fact that it's Cheese, who was a bumbling idiot, it's very interesting that they're making it a prominent display on the Targaryen tapestry here of House of the Dragon, that there's a couple rat catchers in the tapestry who are all hanging, and the blood is dripping down the tapestry, which I think could also symbolize, a small-ish event, but it could come to symbolize the bloodshed that happened from Targaryen rule and the chaos that ensues from Aegon's rule specifically, and how he treats the common people. And the common people, again, has been a very back-and-forth thing for Aegon's rule in particular. They side with him, but then one moment they side with him, and the other moment they don't like him because he's hanging up hundreds and thousands of rat catchers, innocent people, which isn't great. And I see, like, the common people are really telling him, like, hey, it's not looking good. It's not looking good in episode 1. So I'm waiting for that domino to finally fall over later on in this season.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about it later, but we see more of that relationship between the Smogfolk and Aegon in this episode. For a split second, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, where should we start here? Let's go over to let's see here.
There's not a lot of Daemon in this episode, but what it is, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, let's do Daemon. Because you're right. Daemon is a small part of this overall episode, but he does get some of the more interesting stuff. He got a tear out of me, Daemon, in more ways than one through a lot of his sequences. Seeing Millie in this episode, God, she's the best. So what a fantastic! All I saw was the back of her head. I was like, Millie. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his whole journey to Harrenhal.
Yeah. First of all, like, just seeing like Harrenhal like that again is so freaking cool. I think this is the best Harrenhal has ever looked in either of these shows. But I want to highlight the sound design in this entire sequence, because as Daemon is walking through like the halls and like the castle, holding his sword like a fucking shotgun.
Yeah, so good. The light in the shotgun.
Yeah, I love that, man. No, but like as he's like walking around, I love that you can hear like, because in the history of the books and the show, they keep telling stories that this castle is haunted because of what happened with Aegon the Conqueror burning it down, and all of these people that died inside. But I love that you can hear like little like screams in the background very faintly, but and also like as he walks to like the great hall where like the Council of 101, which you see in the pilot of the show, as he walks in and like he sees like it being empty, like you can hear like the faint sound of like cheers and claps and everything. I thought it was like a really cool detail, and it does really like feel like I was joking on Twitter, like, oh, like everybody's over there bickering, Daemon over here is like stuck in the Overlook Hotel of Westeros.
Yeah, he's stuck in the nightmare realm.
But yeah, like I really love how they build that atmosphere, and like it's a really great way to set up what is probably not only comes next in this episode, but probably going to continue in future episodes, of him being constantly like tormented by things that already happened in the past, and that he can like control. Like you can finally see Daemon openly deal with some of the guilt, and that's like we're barely getting teased of it in this episode, and I hope they keep continuing that in further episodes.
Exactly, and that's very exciting that we're going to get more of this, because you know me, I love introspective, weird shit for our characters. And last week we talked about how Daemon had such a great performance against Rhaenyra in a beautiful, tragic argument. And I was kind of worried, like, again, he's not going to be with Rhaenyra for a lot of this season. Hopefully that wasn't our last in episode 2. But I was worried. I'm like, what can they do now with Daemon's arc? We said we're on Daemon watch. What's going to be his arc now that he's kind of left the nest? And we finally get some very introspective, intriguing, awesome character development. The horrors of his actions coming to roost, to his own, horrifying visions. I loved it as well. I think I didn't listen to the sound design that deeply. I haven't listened with headphones on next time. But you're right. The whole atmospheric, horrifying layout of it all. And, weird pull, but it reminded me of like The Haunting in Venice. That movie came out recently.
I can see it, yeah.
Like that old timey kind of like vibe to it, but just also horrifying, just the rain just dripping and oozing with like not prestige, but just like haunted prestige. Like this is where like everything used to be, and the horrors of it all. And you mentioned the Harrenhal legacy brought to the forefront in this episode, and I was kind of like I was reminded about the horrors of Harrenhal. I watched a little short video last night about the horrors of Harrenhal, and it does really kind of connect with what Daemon's going through. Building a unpenetrable fortress for over 40 years just for it to get burned down the same day it gets
finished
by Aegon the Conqueror. It really, the theme of the game is like the hubris of it all, the inevitability. There's always, like we talked about, the cycle of violence, and everything you create is burned to ash and cinders. It's still a big fortress, of course, but it's similar to what Daemon's going through, like trying to put on this bravado, trying to put on this presence, and trying to chase this legacy. Is he's climbing that, like, it's a myth where you're trying to push up the boulder for so long, and you're never really going to get to the top. And he's kind of feeling that, like, he's been trying to push forth this bravado, this aura of like not only like loyalty, but also like things he should have gotten, this legacy he should have gotten, this right he should have gotten, and the love he always desired. And it kind of amounts to, at this point in his life, not much, basically based on his own, complicated actions. As we talked about last week, he does love Rhaenyra, but he also does love, but he still is still chasing that love from Rhaenyra and his dearly departed brother. But now he's coming to kind of face the forefront of those actions that led up to that argument last week, and the truths and the horrors of that argument is coming to pass, or coming to be seen by himself through all these complicated ways. And it was very surprising for me.
Yeah. To to add to your point real quick about like Damon kind of like putting this armor to seem like he's like tougher than he is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I love that he like when like the Lord Strong of the castle, when he's like, "Oh, my prince," and he's like, "I'm not prince, I'm King Consort. It's your
Right.
grace." It's like he's still like trying to like be tough, but like at the same time, like one of the reasons why I like that is because like he almost seems disappointed that taking the castle was as easy as it was. Like there was not a bigger like challenge to him.
He was ready for a battle, and he got
yeah.
like one dude who was just like, "Oh,"
like knocks him out. But again, like one of the things that really that, as you mentioned, like the episode 2 argument between him and Rhaenyra, of him like denying the fact that he didn't order somebody's death with the blood and cheese of it all. Like
exactly.
like Cheese asked, like, if we can't find him, what do we do? And like we
all know what he said.
We all know that he set a son for a son. But like he keeps denying it to Rhaenyra, and he's like, "Oh, it was a mistake. Like, oh, do you really think I'm that big of a monster?" And like him coming to terms with that, with like that scene with a young Rhaenyra and like holding the head, the body and the head of Jaehaerys and like sewing it back together. Like again, like he's like, there's some guilt that this man doesn't want to accept, and he's probably not going to. Yeah, and responsibility. And seeing him like see a character like Damon deal with that is like so interesting, because again, like he's constantly putting this armor on to appear tougher than he is.
Exactly. And let's talk about the point that they used not Emma Darcy, but Millie Alcock, a younger Rhaenyra. I thought that was a very fascinating switch. You know, I loved it because I'm a huge Millie fan, but also for Damon's character, it was very interesting. And there's multiple levels to this. I think Ryan Condal, the level that he mentioned was one that I wasn't thinking of, but it's kind of important in terms of like Rhaenyra is the one that kind of, not older Rhaenyra, but younger Rhaenyra is the one that kind of held this inheritance that he felt he always should have gotten. The kind of Rhaenyra brought up to that older Rhaenyra brought to the forefront last week. But also like, you know, this chair, this legacy, we talked about it last week in terms of not being the big major, at least in my opinion, the big major pool for Damon. Yeah, he felt like he should have wanted that, but also more importantly, he wanted that love and acceptance more than the Iron Throne that from both Rhaenyra and from Viserys, most importantly Viserys, his brother. And that's kind of what he was chasing. But either way, Rhaenyra still represents how his brother favored his daughter, as in Rhaenyra, more than Daemon himself. And that connects to the Iron Throne, and that connects to that familial bond as well.
And it's also the young Rhaenyra that he wronged by taking her to the brothel and basically like.
No, that's what I was thinking.
Releasing this like change of events of like Otto and Alicent trying to like minimize her position in court. Again, like that sense of guilt of like he knew that he was fucking up when he was doing it, but he didn't care. But like now that he's
still
older,
did it anyways.
And now that he's looking back, he's like, yeah, maybe I did. I shouldn't have done that, you know.
That is what, you know, yeah, because Ryan Condal brought up the whole legacy and the throne dynamic, but what you said is exactly what I was thinking too, in terms of, yeah, you didn't fully wrong older Rhaenyra yet. You guys have had a complicated marriage, of course, but it started, and Rhaenyra brought it up, like, I was just a little girl, and you came in, and she thought she could fix them, basically. And we come to this in the past where, like you said, the whole brothel situation really was not great. You know, people have brought up the word grooming. I don't know if Daemon was fully like grooming young Rhaenyra, but it's not in essence not a bad argument. He was kind of like trying to manipulate, trying to use these complicated actions to a younger Rhaenyra. This is the person that he felt like he could take advantage of, given their power dynamic within the family. And it didn't end up happening, of course, because Rhaenyra kind of matured. But it was also, yeah, like Daemon, these were your own actions. These were your complicated actions. And when Rhaenyra's arguing with you about your like loyalty and questioning your loyalty, questioning your actions, it's based in the very major thing again that you did in the past with the whole brothel situation. And I think he still isn't fully accepting his responsibility and the guilt that he faced back in the past. Because again, he just does these random things and he doesn't really think it through. But maybe, just maybe, this whole haunted vision will have him doing just that. And that's what I want to talk to you about as well, Edgar. We're getting these introspective moments with Daemon. You know, it kind of starts here in this episode of this vision, Rhaenyra kind of cleaning up his mess. But is this going to actually affect Daemon? Is he going to come out of this the better man? Is he going to come out of this, shaped differently? Is he going to learn from his mistakes? Daemon usually isn't characterized as one who learned from his mistakes, at least not in like an emotional sense. We know he is an emotionally vulnerable person. We've seen that numerous times already. That is definitely visible. Even in this episode, we see hints of fear and confusion and doubt. And I just wonder if Daemon's actually going to evolve from this, or he's going to come back and just shrug it off. Hopefully not just shrug it off, but like, is it going to visibly affect him? I'm very curious about that by the end of season 2.
Yeah, I'm very curious too, also with keeping in mind the fact that Kondo said that his arc this season was his favorite to like write. So I'm very curious. And also like from what I know of Fire and Blood, there is a point halfway through the war where like we are made to believe that there's something in Daemon that kind of like shifts. I'm not gonna say for the better or worse, but there's something that shifts in him that kind of makes him do like things that you might have not expected him to do.
Okay, interesting.
And also has something to do with like the whole character of Alice Rivers, which we are introduced to in this episode.
Exactly. Let's bring that up. Yeah. One of many new characters in this episode.
She doesn't get a lot to do. Just one line of like, "This is the place that you're gonna die."
What was that about, Edgar? What was that about? Is he gonna die in Harrenhal of all places? Fuck me.
No comment. But again, like this is a character that's going to affect not only just him, but like a lot of people. Like in Fire and Blood, I believe, if I'm correct, that we are to be believed that she's like over like 100 years old, like at least a couple hundred years old. So this is like a witch. So yeah, like
is that going to continue with this portrayal, or like was she like was the reveal that she was 100 years old? Was that planted as soon as we saw like these visions? Was that later in the fact, or was that?
I think it's later. I think if I believe in it, even if I don't know, like I think there's like theories that Alice Rivers might be another character in the main story of Game of Thrones, but I don't even think she's in the show.
But that's what I was wondering, because like I don't, granted, guys, I've had the book, I haven't read the book. Like I'm very curious, like if they introduced this character during this point in the story, did like the people telling this narrative, they were like, oh, and by the way, she also lives to be 100 or something years old. I'm very curious, because like this mystical stuff is very interesting to me. Harrenhal is very close to like the Isle of Faces, the magic of Westeros. So it's like, is that part? Is there a connection there?
We'll see. No, but again, like Alice Rivers, like again, like I'm very excited how they utilize her in the show, because again, like one of the things that always pissed me off about Game of Thrones is that as the show went on, even though we had like ice zombies and dragons and all of this stuff, like for some reason they just like kept shying away from the magical aspect of the story. Like
Melisandre, Melisandre's like the biggest one. Yeah.
Melisandre, and then the dire wolves, they have like a really big magical part to play in the books, and they're just like barely in the show. Like they keep saying that it was like a budget thing, it was either dragons or the wolves, and I'm like, come on, you can do both.
HBO would have given you the money, guys.
They wanted you to make more seasons. Don't act like. But yeah, like again, like I'm excited. Like I hope that they continue this like mystical, magical element that she's gonna bring to the story.
I hope so. And small spoilers for The Boys. You're watching The Boys as well, right?
Yeah.
Butcher's getting these visions of his tragically departed wife throughout season 4 via his like illness. I wouldn't mind seeing Millie Alcock sprinkled in throughout these episodes as kind of like a similar presence to that, where like the ghost of Millie is really like doing that.
I wouldn't be surprised, because I remember when the trailers were coming up for season 2, a lot of people thought that there was like a shot of somebody that looked like Aemma, like Viserys' first wife. I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually Millie in the trailer, and she was like lying down in bed, like it was like a sex scene or something.
Oh, I would love that. I mean,
so I don't know what that is about. That's new information for me too, because this is not in the book. So yeah, I would be excited to see.
I love when characters like have that haunted ghost behind them. It's very much like, you know, the Christmas Carol kind of stuff, but it's very much like the haunted nature of your past. Somebody who you were very close to, you know, really reminding you about your faults and your actions. It's very exciting. And again, just to put a cap on this whole Daemon stuff, I'm very curious to see what this will amount to. And going back to the hilarious conversation with Simon Strong there. It goes back to what you were saying in terms of like him expecting a big battle, but also Simon being like, hey, have some venison, come sit down for dinner, have some of our peas that aren't poisoned. You're good. It was very interesting. You see, and again, like you said, Daemon's really wrestling for that control. And, you know, Simon's all about just like, hey, do your thing. You can try your best, but, you know, the Riverlands are fucked. And that's has nothing to do with him. It has something to do with the River Run leader. What's his name? The guy who can't sew his butt up. What's his name?
Is it Grover? I forgot.
Something Tully, right?
It is a Tully, yeah.
But yeah, I wrote the name down here and I lost it. I have a lot of notes. But yeah, like one of the Tullys, you know, is in charge of the Riverlands. I thought that was very fascinating. We can kind of use this Daemon thing to connect to the Kristen Cole of it all. But Daemon's plan, just to give people and audiences a map of the inevitable conflict, Daemon's plan: go straight to Harrenhal with your dragon, seize control, use Harrenhal as like the biggest castle in the land to round up forces, use those forces to conquer the other small river run, you know, holds, I guess.
Yeah.
And then go south from there to King's Landing. Meanwhile, Kristen's plan is to first round up these small houses first, force them to bend the knee to Aegon's rule, if they aren't already, and then use those forces to take Harrenhal, and then use Harrenhal to take Dragonstone. Both of these very ambitious plans that are probably not going to happen. But we can swing over from Simon and Daemon's funny dinner conversation, which, by the way, this show is nailing fantastic comedy amidst like this interpersonal drama. The comedy in this episode was very good.
I also like that the comedy is not as like in your face as it was like in the later seasons of Game of Thrones. It's more like not subtle, but it's just like more natural.
That season 5 comedy, not great, Bob.
Oh my god. Season 5 to like 8, it's just a bunch of dick jokes.
Yeah, it's not, you know, the first thing I think of in terms of like badly written comedy is the whole Journalist incursion.
Yeah. Okay, I just finished rewatching season 5 and I'm like,
oh no,
cringing. I'm like, because like even before season 8 and 7, I was like, I always was of the thought that season 5 just sucks. Like it has some really good. It has some really good episodes, like Hard Home, fucking incredible, you know?
Oh yeah.
What is it? A Dance with Dragons, episode 9 or something? Like Danny's first ride on Drogon or whatever. Like there's some really cool moments, some really cool
the back half of
individual episodes. Yeah. But like the season as a whole is just like, oh my fucking god, what were you guys doing? Like I know like you were trying to do your own thing because you weren't gonna have a next book to adapt, but like you compare what happens in book 5 to season 5, and I'm like, what the hell happened here?
It's funny because I wasn't watching it during that time. I don't think. I think my first episode was beginning of season 6. I think while season 5 was airing, I was rewatching the series. Which one is Jon Snow? Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones, I guess, whatever. But which one does Jon Snow die in? Is that
the finale of 5?
Finale of 5. So yeah, I heard about that spoiler, and I was like, okay, let me go watch the series now. Finally.
Yeah, that's what made me want to watch Game of Thrones too. Like, I was on Twitter as that episode was airing. I was like, let me go watch this show.
It was one of the things that was hard to avoid, right? Like, it was on the radio on my way to Wanna Hills, or my high school. It was on the radio in the morning. I'm just, driving to school, and I'm just like, oh, wow, okay, guess that happened. But yeah, so it brought me and my dad to finally binge it. We binged it all in like a week over the summer. But anyways, yeah, I wonder, was season 5 looked down on while it was live, probably not. Like, I guess the majority probably liked it until like it's one of those hindsight things where you're like, oh, this was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, like I think people started to realize that something was pretty wrong with the show, like from season 5 onward, when the whole Sansa situation happened with Ramsay. That's when like a lot of people were like, oh, yeah,
not great.
But yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, but yeah, so again, just in general, I said that all to say the comedy in this episode was pretty good, and I liked the comedy overall throughout House of the Dragon's first 2 seasons, these 13 episodes. I really liked how well these comedy bits are, and that kind of leads into the unintentional comedy of the Hightowers and Kristen's struggle this episode. You know, we see him first shot of Kristen Cole looking out the window, staring into nothingness, because this guy is he's cooked. like I don't think he really wanted this position of Hand of the King. We see him with the hand now attached to his armor. He didn't really want this position. Again, like I mentioned, he was kind of like that awkward boy while Otto and Aegon were fighting last week, and then at the end of the argument, Aegon's like, oh, wait, by the way, you're now Hand, Kristen. He's like, oh, I wasn't really paying attention, but okay, cool. And he's late to the proceeding. He gets to the proceeding, and he's not Otto. Edgar, he can't control this at all.
And I love that because of his new position, you can start seeing some cracks in his relationship with Alicent, which wasn't perfect to begin with. But now now that there's like a power struggle between those two, it's gonna become more complicated. It is already complicated. But it's just like very awkward. Like there are some points that Alicent makes in this council meeting that are correct of like
in terms of
like the whole battle plans and like going to war, and she brings up the Eric and Arik thing of it all. And like,
whose plan was that, by the way? Kristen?
And then Kristen just laughs it out. It's like, oh yeah, shut up, like, almost like in a shut up, woman.
Yeah.
Kind of like,
shut up, woman. Yeah, I'm like, guys, this is we talked about it last week. Edgar, like this is the Dowager Queen. Like she should have some kind of presence, some kind of like respect in this court, and consistently, Alicent is getting laughed at. And usually, and again, that's the beauty of Alicent's complicated characters, partially because of her own doing and the doing of the world itself. But yeah, it's very sad to see. And, you know, she can't, for all the, we gotta control Aegon. She's not controlling shit in this council. She gets laughed at by Kristen, of all people. And the other men are just bickering.
Yeah, and like she tries to like put a stop on the whole bickering of it all, because like even like the Maester is trying to like make war plans, and then like Tywin Lannister is like, what do you know about war anyway? You know, like it's like all of these people just like throwing shit at the wall and see what sticks.
It's very fun.
Yeah, and again, like they do mention like the whole Blackwoods and Bracken conflict of it all is like, it's like that wasn't really a win for either us or the Blacks. Like both teams got like screwed over because of that battle at the Burning Hill. And
Aegon's like, it's war. It's like, yeah, we won.
Yeah, like not really. But something that I want to talk about this episode, which I'm gonna be very curious how it plays out in next week's episode, is how, and I don't know how you feel about this, but like I feel like Aemon is trying to set up Aegon for failure, in the sense that like when Kristen is making his plans and he's like, oh, Vhagar and Aemon are gonna stay behind to guard the city or whatever, and then Aegon offers himself to go with him to have a dragon, so if anybody comes from Team Black, like they'll have a dragon too to defend.
By the way, who's Aegon's dragon again?
Sunfire.
Sunfire, okay.
So when that happens, and then like everybody like, oh, my king, like you can't go, and he's like, oh no, I'm gonna go, and then Aemon is like, oh yeah, like you're too valuable, like almost like in a mocking way, but like in a manipulating way of like, I'm gonna try to make him stay by making him seem like he's weak, like he couldn't be able to like do it. And by doing that, like Aegon is even like, oh no, I'm going. It's the only person that gets him to like back down is like Larys later on. But like
that was like interesting to me, yeah.
And it kind of connects back to like what happens later in the episode between those two, between the brothers. Is like Aegon like keeps like mocking Aemon for literally just like living his like own weird little life on the side. So like again, like you keep seeing like this resentment that Aemon has for Aegon. So I'm really curious to see how it's gonna play out next week, because like as we know, Rhaenyra has like dragons patrolling like all of these like locations, and like Kristen doesn't want any dragons involved in his team when he goes to Harrenhal because he's gonna like get the attention of the other team. So like in the trailer like that we see in episode 4 is like you kind of see like a conflict between dragons. So like how do
I
we
saw
get
Vhagar there.
Vhagar and
Vhagar's there.
Vhagar is there. So what happens in between these two episodes that we get there? Like I'm very curious.
I think what we saw, to answer that question, like we were on character watch. We're like, let's see what happens between Aegon and Aemond. In the first episode, Aegon has, in between season 1 and 2, put Aemond on the court in this council, which is okay. It's a plus for the brotherly relationship. That's cool. He's like actually there. Good job for Aemond and Aegon. But also behind the scenes, Aemond and Kristen were kind of making fun of Aegon and also saying like, hey, we need to do this, that, and the third. Aegon's kind of like unruly or whatever during that little powwow in episode 1. Episode 2 comes along and we didn't get much of Aegon and Aemond, but driven by like the revenge, we're like, okay, is he going to use Aemond to enact his revenge against the Blacks? And then cut to this episode, and while we do see Aemond professing like, hey, you should be safe, my king, you're right. I didn't even think too much about it, but I don't know if he's trying to set up. You're saying like he's trying to set up Aegon as weak by making him stay in.
Or maybe for failure, like I'm gonna bring up this comment from Bad Thought Studios. Like he is technically the next in line to the throne because Jaehaerys is dead. And like here's the thing.
I don't know if that was Aemond because Aemond is a fool. Is Aemond really setting up his brother to die, guys? I don't know if it's gotten to that point yet. He hates his brother. But is he ready to like indirectly kinslay?
And like if this were to happen again, like I know what happens at this battle, like but like if something like that were to happen, like it would kind of like make sense with like my little theory that I had like when we discussed like episode 1 of the season like 2 weeks ago of like I feel like Aemond is gonna be the real Daemon that Otto always thought Daemon was, of like this guy that was like constantly waiting for his brother to die so he could be the one sitting on the throne. Like I don't think it's like we've discussed it, like we don't really think that Daemon actually wants to be king. He just wants to think that other people think that he's capable of being king. Aemond actually does seem like he wants it. But I don't know.
I mean, that's what I thought in season 1, that Aemond really wants to be king. But what I kind of characterized Aemond as is similar to what we talked about with the other young boys. He's eager for battle. He wants to prove himself, just like Daemon wants to prove himself when he went over to Harrenhal, but it amounted to nothing. Is Aemond ready to prove himself, but is it going to amount to anything? I guess we'll have to see what happens after this battle. Yes, he hints way too much within the show that how much he's driven by power. He's driven by violence. Is he driven by power? Does he want to stand as the king? I've kind of, to be honest, I've kind of backed off away from that for Aemond. He wants to prove himself, but he's willing to prove himself to the entire realm by being king? Or does he just wants, similar to all the high towers and their complicated ass family, does he want love and acceptance more so than just power?
Good question. Because I don't know if you remember this from the trailers, there's like this shot from season 2 of like Aemond like walking, like looking at the Iron Throne, like walking towards it. Has that happened yet or not?
Oh, I forget that shot. I don't think so.
Okay, interesting.
I don't think so. You're the one who rewatches all these episodes. I see snippets. I don't know, guys. Tones, I see what you're saying. He's driven by. It's hard to clarify whether a character is driven by power or driven by aggression, because like people going back to Daemon again. Is Daemon driven by power? Does he really want power, or does he want love and acceptance? And because of that, he's driven by violence because he feels like that's the only way he can get said love and acceptance. I don't know yet for Aemond. To be honest, we haven't gotten a lot of Aemond besides him curling up, being very vulnerable to his first, where he lost his virginity. But like, and he also can't stand his brother, but also I think partially maybe respects his brother a little bit. I don't know. I feel like if I asked Aemond, do you respect your brother? He'd be like, of course I do, but I feel like you'd be lying to me. So I don't know. I don't know, and I can't wait to see how he acts in this battle. But going back to the very beginning, when you asked, like, how do we get from Aemon saying, or from Kristen saying we should have a dragon, they're saying we shouldn't have a dragon, and Aegon is saying, like, I want to go with my dragon, but Aemon says, no, don't. But wait, which one of the characters said, like, Vhagar has to stay to protect the realm? That was Kristen, right?
That was
Vhagar
Kristen,
has to stay. And that's kind of where the scene ended, right? Like Aemon, and I was kind of confused. I was like, so is Aegon going? Is he not going? I was kind of confused by that. Cut to Aegon putting on the armor, and it seems like he was going to go until Lara says you probably shouldn't go. And I was just curious. I think the big push here is Aemon being embarrassed. He gets embarrassed later on, and that pushes him to do what? Oh, prove himself with violence. I don't know if he gets full approval. He probably does, but Kristen's not there anymore. The hand's not there. I think Aemon is going to really drive, push forward, tell Aegon, like, I have to go to this battle. And Aegon, who doesn't want to go, says, yeah, you can do it. To me, that scene when he walks the throne trailer looks like the dreams Dany had in Game of Thrones. It does, like in terms of, when
cinematography, it does look very dreamy. Yeah,
it does look very dreamy. How many dreams and visions are we getting? Is Alice Rivers going to go over to King's Landing and fuck up Aemon too? That'd be very funny. But no, it seems very real. But
where do you want to go now, Alicent? Because like before, like Kristen goes, he gets introduced to her little brother.
But before I do that, just to put a wrap on Aemon, I think it's very interesting that Kristen Cole, Hand of the King, can't control the council. He's only good at what? He's only good at proving himself in battle. So when he goes off, that vacuum of power might make it easier for Aemon to convince Aegon to, hey, big bro, I want to prove myself in battle. Let me bring Vhagar. We'll get the war. We'll get the destruction that you so fervently want. He's going to appeal to Aegon's thirst for violence and power. But again, I just don't know if Aemon is ready for that power yet.
Yeah, and if that were to happen next week, it would like drive home the point of like it's too late to stop this. With like the Rhaenyra and Alicent scene at the end of the episode of like, it's already like going on. Like even if we wanted to do something about it, like it's too late.
There's no putting reverse on this train. Yeah, it's full steam ahead. But yeah, like going from the Kristen of it all to, we'll come back to Kristen because he kind of is directly tied to this next storyline in terms of Alicent introducing us to another new character in Sir Gawain.
Coolest motherfucker of the episode. Besides Stamen.
You said he was cool. I didn't get like a cool vibe from him. It was weird. I got the vibe that like,
I don't know. Anybody who disrespects Kristen Cole is cool in my book.
It's cool to me. Yeah. when he came over there making fun of Kristen, I was like, it's weird because Sir Gawain, like the Sir Hightower person, he came across as in TV cliche, movie cliche, the rich kid who's related to a main character who comes in, who's like, who's this like brawny, strong guy who kind of rose from the top. Like, I can make fun of you because I'm of a higher status. Usually, those higher status characters are ones that A, get humbled, as we see in this episode, and B, are just like, as an audience member, looked down upon. Like, I'm like, Sir Gawain, who does he think he is? And yeah, he does get humbled, but there's a part of me that was kind of like you, where I'm like, oh, he's making fun of Kristen. Make all the jokes you want, because I can't stand Kristen's crazy, hypocritical ass right now. So I was kind of on both sides of it, where I don't think he's like cool yet. Maybe next week he pulls off some cool stunts. But I loved how many digs he was just hitting at the Dornish man and Kristen. It was very funny. And yeah, and when he kisses Alicent's finger, everybody's like, "Is there something sad going on here? What's going on?" We can't take any sibling
relationship seriously
in this show. It's like, were they fucking in the past? It's like, you never really know. Sir Gawain is a very interesting new character, poking fun at Kristen. And I kind of like his, his aura. It's kind of like that rich, uptight kind of aura. I don't know.
Yeah.
It comes across to me as somebody who doesn't have a lot of battle experience, especially when we get to the second half.
I mean,
of
this is the same guy. I think it's the same guy that gets beaten by Damon in the pilot too. So.
Oh, what the hell? It is?
I think it is. I think they
That's
said
cool.
like how like he like picks one of like they gave him like a choice to pick like who he wants to fight first in the tourney, and he picks like Otto's son because he's like right there watching.
Wow.
I think it is the same guy. I'm pretty sure.
That'd be cool. There's also somebody else we see from season 1 in terms of like the blonde waitress.
Oh yeah,
in there,
Diana, or whatever her name was.
Yeah, the person who got attacked by Aegon, for lack of better words there. And it's interesting seeing season 1 characters pop up in season 2 with different levels of pedigree. But yeah, Sir Gawain, this is a character who we get introduced here, who might die in the very next episode. Like as soon as I saw him, I was like, Alicent,
you're a goner.
Like I got You're a goner vibes. And this is before the whole running away from Bela scene. I just got like, oh, like I can do this. Like hey, like who are you, Kristen Cole? And as much as I do not like Kristen Cole, guys, Kristen Cole was, bred for violence, bred for battle. He rose up through the ranks because he's a good fighter. Yeah, because Rhaenyra had a crush on him. But like he rose up from the ranks because he's a good fighter. That can't be disputed.
Yeah, and like going back to the whole Gawain is a goner thing, like I've read the book, so I should know what happens. But like even while I'm watching the scene of like them running from Bela and Moondancer, like I'm like, is Kristen gonna like knock him over so he like falls back and like like the dragon eats him? Like it's because like this is something that I could totally see Kristen do just because he's such a petty motherfucker.
Yeah, it's kind of like Walking Dead. Like you don't gotta be fast. He's getting faster than the person behind you. Remember when Shane shot the guy? It's like
yeah.
It's like sorry, I'll tell Alicent. Like, you were a brave soldier. But yeah, so that was funny. But yeah, so Sir Gawain is a very interesting character. We can cut to the Bela thing in general because it's not long. But like, when Bela is hunting them down, I as well for sure thought one of them was going to like bite it. Not Kristen, obviously, plot armor. But speaking of plot armor, Jalen, my brother, he thought like, oh, is Kristen going to die this episode? Just like the way he's positioned in this episode, coming off cross, like very down on himself from the very first scene where he's looking out the window.
Then he asked for like Alicent's favor.
Asking for Alicent's favor. I'm like, are we getting red flags from Kristen? And guys, I don't read the books. I don't know when he's supposed to die. And that's a very interesting thing for me. I'm like, should we see Kristen die by the end of the season? Is he one of those characters that survives to the very end and then dies? But for me, he has a red flag. It's a small red flag. We're going to see how much it grows throughout season 2. I wonder how long it's going to take for him to bite the dust.
I love how like people, including one of friend of the show, Noah Olsen, they hate this character so much that they've like gone out of their way to spoil their death just because they want to see how they die.
I've seen a lot of people were after last week's episode. They were like, "Let me go on Google and look up how
just
and
to make
where."
myself happy for a second.
Yeah, how, where, and why this motherfucker bites to dust. I can't wait. I don't know the depths of any character.
Yeah,
I think besides a certain character.
I mean, the funny thing is that how certain characters die because of the Game of Thrones mentions it, but like you just
and that's the one character that I know, like Paris is, but like the one that Joffrey brings up in Game of Thrones. But I'm kind of like I don't know. Is Alicent going to die from falling rocks? Hopefully not. I don't want her to get the Cersei death. But I don't know how these characters are going to go. It's very exciting.
And going back a little bit to like the whole like Kristen Cole death a little, like obviously I'm not gonna spoil it, but I do think like a lot of people I feel like a lot of people wanna paint Alicent as this show's version of Cersei, as of this character that you love to hate. Yeah. The character is very clearly Kristen Cole in the show.
Yeah, Kristen Cole is the character you can't stand. This is, but I loved Cersei. I love watching Cersei do.
Oh yeah, like again, like you love to hate these people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what you're saying. So yeah, I can't. Fabian's doing a fantastic job.
Leave him alone, guys.
Yeah, leave him alone. You can say, "Oh man, I can't stand Kristen Cole," but man, you were doing great, man. You gotta do both sides of the tongue there when you're on social media.
But yeah.
So Sir Gawain is a new character. We talked about Alice Rivers. Let's continue the Hightower stuff. Oh, speaking of Hightower family drama, what do you think of that tragic little scene we get between Helena and Alicent?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, go on.
No. I was just gonna we've been talking a lot about Helena in the show in the sense of how of her choice and her relationship with Alicent and how it contrasts what would have Alicent done if she would have been in her position of would she have picked the boy or the girl or whatever. I think that line that Helena has in the show of I forgive you, it's obviously I think
loaded.
It's loaded, but I think we're supposed to interpret it as about Alicent basically screwing with Kristen the night that Blood and Cheese happened, but I think it's
that's
way
the
more
surface
loaded.
level one.
That's the surface level. It's more than that because as much as I love this character and as much as I feel bad for what has happened to this character in her life, Alicent is just simply not a good mother, and she's never been a good mother to these kids. She may love her children, that's the different thing, but has she actually been a good mother? I don't entirely think so. And again, that line of Helena of I forgive you, because I think Helena to an extent understands that there's so much that Alicent could have done for them given the position that she was placed in by Otto and Viserys and all of these men in her life. So again, I think it's a really beautiful scene.
Yeah, it's a very good small scene. And Alicent has always been a character who has really been pressured when she was younger to have these children. And that part was tragic. She had no control over that, the powers that be in terms of Viserys and Otto and her, becoming a mother at such a young age. She didn't really have that much control. But it is fair to say, kind of what you're saying, how she treats said children once they were born, that is partially under her control as, their, without a doubt, mother. And she just didn't do a good job. All throughout season 1, she's slapping Aegon. And then, telling, not doing as much as she could for Aemond. If you wonder why Aemond isn't going to Alicent with these issues and not, the brothel, because Alicent didn't really do her best job with Aemond either, especially when Luce broke his eye, cut out his eye. It's Alicent, in Aemond's mind, didn't do enough to support him. And then going to the third child there, Helena, Alicent was partially responsible for allowing Helena to be with her sick brother and Aegon. Kind of all the bad things that happened to Helena, Alicent was just never there to emotionally support Helena. We talked about last week how Alicent was I just feel so sorry for Helena. I feel so bad for Helena. But she's saying that to Otto or somebody. She's not talking to Helena.
Yeah, and she also put Helena in that position by marrying her off to Aegon instead of Jacaerys.
Yeah, exactly. It's she put Helena to marry this brother who is not great, guys. We see in this episode, we see how Aegon treats Aemond.
Yeah, we've known that since that character was introduced in season 1.
Yeah, he's not a great person, and we like I mentioned earlier, we even get reintroduced to the person that Aegon, again, lack of a better word, slept with in season 1, and then Alicent had to cover it up. So it's not great. But in regards to Helena, again, it's just, she wasn't the emotionally supportive mom that Helena needed her to be throughout Jacaerys' death and throughout other events. And it's very tragic to see.
And then there's Darren, who was just sent away from, I don't know how old he was when he was sent away to,
And by the way, we get a small Darren reference again this episode, where it's just Darren has a dragon or something like that. They mentioned Darren's dragons and Old Town or whatever. Very funny. Keep on talking. I got a phone call in a sec.
Yeah. So yeah, with like this whole Alicent thing of it all, again, like I thought it was a really beautiful scene, and um, I want to move on a little bit to the black side because I think there's a lot of information there, a lot of story that we got from those characters. I think more so than the Greens. I think this is the most that we've gotten from the blacks, and I want to start off with Rhaena, because this is one of the things that I absolutely adore about this episode. One of the, even though like we've discussed that it is probably the weakest of the season so far, it has some of my favorite elements, some of my favorite elements of the season. We're finally getting more of Bela and Rhaena, which was lacking a lot in season one and lacking a lot in the early first two episodes of the season. And like now that we're getting more of them, Bela obviously off with scouting the skies with a moon dancer, and now with Rhaena. I love that that we're getting like to explore more of her psyche, of how she views herself and how she thinks others view her, as somebody who doesn't have a dragon, who never had a dragon hatch from their egg, and how she views herself almost as like less than the rest of the family. This is something that was introduced in season one, between that confirmation and between that conversation that she has with her mother Lena of am I gonna be sent away from Pentos because the Lord of Pentos doesn't like that I don't have a dragon or something like that. And like now that she's being sent away actually by a member of her own family with Rhaenyra, I think it's like a really interesting way to frame it from her perspective, even though like I don't think she realizes that how much of an honor it is what Rhaenyra is asking her to do. Because at the end of the day, like I think Rhaenyra understands that there's no going back, so she has to protect the future of House Targaryen in any way that she can. And like the only way that she can do that right now is by sending her youngest children away. And like Rhaena is that avenue to do that, because yeah, she may not have a role to play in the actual war, but she can play another role, which can be like the role of to be like the mother of these kids. I'm talking a little bit about Rhaena here, Evan.
Yeah, and I felt like that was partially it's good and bad in a sense. Where it's like it's good in the sense that she's putting all this responsibility, this good responsibility, to Rhaena. That's good, especially like the dragon eggs. That's some major responsibility. But at the same time, it's also tragic in a sense that, like, similar. We were just talking about Helena and Alicent, but like, Rhaenyra is putting Rhaena in like this motherhood role, which is very like tragic. You know, back when Rhaenyra in season one was talking to her mother, she was like, "I don't want to be a mother, really. I just want to be like, I want to fly off on my dragon. I want to do like, cool things." Yeah. She's kind of stealing that opportunity away from Rhaena. Like instead of like putting her into a more pivotal role, she's like putting this motherhood role, not actually giving birth, but just being like this motherhood figure to her children, to Rhaenyra's children. And it's kind of tragic in a sense, but also good that she's not going to be part of this bloodshed.
Yeah, and also like one of the things again like that have been like a little bit frustrating about Bela and Rhaena so far in the show was that we haven't really gotten to like know who these characters are individually, which is a little bit. I mean, at least now they're finally exploring it, but like it was starting to get a little bit problematic because of how important they become for the story towards the second half of this entire conflict. Without going into spoilers, so like I'm glad that we're finally gonna get more, and we know that the Lady of the Veil is cast, so we're probably gonna see a little bit of that, and like how Rhaena develops her own like politics maybe with that, and yeah, like
so yeah. My question is like, I couldn't tell if this was the show saying like goodbye Rhaena, like nice knowing you, like in terms of like screen time and character sense, but she is going to the Veil, but then she is going to Pentos.
Yeah.
Right? That's the plan?
I think the plan is basically go to the Veil, drop off Joffrey, and then send a raven to the Lord of Pentos, see if they would like host them, and then go to Pentos. I'm also like curious how they're gonna deal with it, because like there are certain events that have to happen between her being still in Westeros to her getting to Pentos. Um, so yeah, it's gonna be very interesting how all of this is dealt with. If this is like
Okay.
a way for the show to like write her off for a minute, or actually give her something to do, like from a more like politician standpoint, I guess.
Okay, that's exciting. That's cool. That's cool then. Because I was kind of worried. I was like, oh, we're really saying goodbye to Rhaena? Like, it seemed like, okay, this is the dragons, these are the babies, the children, and then Rhaena is off. But it is hopefully, yeah, like you said, hopefully we get some stuff with the Vale, some politics there. Because they do need men from the Vale, right, to help with their support. So the Vale and the Starks are two major houses they're looking for as support in the north. So we'll have to wait and see on that. You just talk about like Rhaenyra in general, yeah.
Yeah, well, just because like moving on from the greens and the blacks, let me bring out this comment. Where the fuck is Bloody Ben? I really thought the Blackwood kid from the opening of the episode was Bloody Ben, but pretty sure that guy died, so it's probably not him.
Who's Bloody Ben?
It's a character. I mean, he does play a certain important role later on, but it's like more like a side character, and he's like a very like loyalist to like the blacks, so he's a really fun character.
Cool. But yeah, I'm with you though. I think we were done pretty much with the Greens
before we come back to King's Landing at the end.
Yeah, before we come to King's Landing at the very end. But Rhaenyra, she had her huge argument with Daemon. She sends Rhaena. These names, guys, you're doing yourself no favors, you Targaryens.
No wonder Alicent got them confused.
Right, I know, right? It's like Aegon. Like, come on, give me a chance here. But yeah, Rhaenyra's whole avenue this episode is very fascinating. And again, on the downside, it is kind of repetitive because we're getting similar stuff from Rhaenyra in terms of like, I don't want to do a battle, but also I can't trust Alicent. But maybe I can trust Alicent, but also I don't want to send my dragons off to battle. It's like we're getting this push and pull with Rhaenyra, and I like that it somewhat is addressed within the show, that like conflicted nature that Rhaenyra is having so far in these first 3 episodes. Yeah. Daemon's not happy with it because Daemon's kind of like, let's just do this, and that got him sent away. And then now the men and her council are kind of upset with her, maybe even more so because it kind of like, hey, Rhaenyra, maybe you can just go off and we'll order things around. Like these people are doing like little bits of treason, trying to like get Rhaenyra out of here because she's not doing what they want. She is still very much like not very much ready for this war that we all know is coming.
They're almost like trying to do what like the Green Council has done to Alicent to an extent, even though she's like the head of that team of Team Black. But yeah, like
but this whole avenue for Rhaenyra is like these men want action, and Rhaenyra kind of wants to step away. She wants to seek counsel and others like
Rhaenys. And I think like I've seen people criticize the scene between her and Alicent, and we'll talk about it later to an extent. But I think that scene is like her convincing herself to actually do something about this whole thing, about making a decision to actually go to war, because she's been very reluctant. She keeps thinking that there's a chance for peace, and like I think that final conversation, how it goes down, is her like, okay, like there's no way out, so might as well just go at it.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I think that scene was so critical as a Rhaenyra fan to be like, okay, Rhaenyra, you tried your one last chance, now it's time. But yeah, but before we get to that, again, Rhaenyra is just, it's very similar to Alicent to an extent, where Alicent is more so doing this because of her own, complicated actions and hypocritical actions. But both Alicent and Rhaenyra are both characters who can't get their way. And Rhaenyra can get her way most of the time because she is queen. So when she says something, it's kind of done, in contrast to Alicent, who's just being laughed at and ignored. Rhaenyra still has that power to move her words, but internally, she doesn't know which way to go. She's stuck between her personal conflict with Alicent and it's the heart and the head dilemma for Rhaenyra. So I kind of sympathize with what she's going towards. And, as a mother, like, having to send her children off, not knowing which direction the war is going, the Brackens and the Blackwoods are fighting. And it's like, what do you do? And I love that Rhaenys kind of giving her that counsel that the men just aren't willing to do or help with it all. But Rhaenys is the one to be like, regardless of, Alicent's role or not role at all and what happened, there might still be a chance. And I like seeing this from Rhaenys. The same person who kind of told Daemon away in episode 1. He's like, get back on your dragon. And she's like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. She's here to talk to Rhaenyra, the person who has the power, the person who has sway. And I think it's a much more interesting relationship.
Yeah. And before we get to the Alicent and Rhaenyra scene, speaking of Rhaenys, that small scene that we get between her and Corlys, I think it's again like
setting up.
Huh?
What do you think that was like trying to set up?
Oh, I think it's still like there's certain things that I can't talk about because of spoilers, like later on the show. But I think I still find it interesting that despite all of this conflict going on, Corlys is still hang up on the whole succession thing of Driftmark. Like, oh well, Luke was dead, and Joffrey isn't really like a sea guy, and neither is Rhaena. Like, does she know about dragons or the sea? Like, and Rhaenys is like, just get over it. Like, we have more important matters in our hands right now than that. And I think like again, like this entire show is about like succession and like choosing like whoever we think it's the right person, even if others disagree with it. And it's gonna be very I'm trying to walk around not spoiling this, but like it's gonna be very interesting to see how Corlys comes to terms of like, I need to focus on what actually is in front of me right now.
Exactly, because right now Corlys is all about like his, and it's logical, right? Though his succession, like who do we got to take control of what's next? He's like Joffrey and Baela, like none of them have seen the sea, none of them don't know left to right on a ship. So it's like, what do we have to worry about? What do we have to do here? And yeah, like you said, Rhaenys is kind of trying to rein him in, being like, that's a problem for another time. Conflict is happening, and we need to be ready. And no Adam or Alan in this episode, but we do get more from Corlys, which is important. Oh, and that kind of reminds me, we do see sea smoke in another Rhaenyra scene. With
Mysaria. Yeah.
So Mysaria, who is now going to be part of the council, right? That council court.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure, like, which is a pretty cool, fun, I guess, that both Larys and Mysaria get promoted to like basically Master of Whispers on both sides. Good
point. Yeah, because when Aegon kind of steps away from war, Larys is there to say like, hey, if you go, people are going to like. What do you say specifically? It was like Alicent and somebody else. He said Alicent and was it Aemond?
Something like that, yeah.
Alicent and Aemond might like wrestle control away from you if you leave, but if you stay, it's not going to matter as much, basically. So it kind of convinces him to stay, and because of that, Aegon promotes Larys. And on the other hand, Mysaria really helped out with the Eric Arik situation, and she wants to stay with Rhaenyra. I like this friendship that's developing. My question is though, how much is it from Mysaria's POV? Is she going to pull for revenge against the Hightowers more than her loyalty for Rhaenyra? How genuine is this friendship from Mysaria? You never really know what she's thinking. But I want to hope for the best from this dynamic, from this duo. So kind of curious where that's going to lead. But for Rhaenyra, it can only having another woman on this council besides Rhaenys is always a good thing. Because again, the men are the same people trying to say, "Hey, maybe you should leave. Let us handle it for your safety, of course." So yeah, having a person like Mysaria can't be too much of a problem when the men are acting like that.
And also going back to the whole mentioning, you mentioning Sea Smoke, I'm pretty sure that's confirmation that Laenor is dead.
You think so?
Because I like the common.
The common thing is that like
the common thing about dragons
can't have
more than one rider. Yeah. So, So yeah, like Sea Smoke is like seems like to be like in mourning in a sense, and when like
Think so?
and when like Mysaria says like, oh, he just seems lonely, and like Rhaenyra gives like that look of like, because she obviously knows that Laenor was alive, was actually alive the whole time, so she kind of gives like a look of like, like maybe something did happen to him in his like adventures in the Triarchy or whatever.
That's interesting. I didn't take it as that. Like, it would be weird to do a change from the books. Right? Like, oh, change. Homeboy is alive. Laenor is alive, and then just kill him off screen again. Anyways, that would be kind of weird.
I think it might have been just like a way for them to like not make Rhaenyra and Daemon seem like bad guys in a sense. And also because like at that point like Daemon had already killed like his own wife too, and like another factor, and like I mean I don't know if this is like, I don't know the thought process of these people, but it might be also like a part of like maybe they didn't want to kill like another one of their few like queer characters back to back with Joffrey and then this guy again like 2 episodes later. So
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I just figured that Sea Smoke was riderless because Laenor died, but didn't die. He shaved off all his head, all his hair, so he kind of removing the Targaryen, lineage from his life, or the Velaryon lineage from his life, and then because of that, Sea Smoke was like, okay, this guy has turned over a new leaf, and then just walked away from Sea Smoke.
Like the Dragonborn is like for life until like the Dragon Rider dies, so that's why.
Okay, is that canon in the show though?
I mean, in the show they never really explain it, also because like Daenerys doesn't really know much about the dragon lore. Like she's like barely like learning as she goes.
Yeah.
Fun fact, like the word Dracarys doesn't even exist like in Valyrian culture. It's a word that Daenerys made up to control to help control the dragon. So it's kind of funny that now these prequels are just like using it, because I mean it makes sense. It's like it's a way to simplify things, but
that's funny.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't get the vibe that Laenor is dead. I just got this vibe that Sea Smoke is like has to unfortunately, sadly move on from Laenor to find another writer. But it was kind of weird where Rhaenyra, I get why Mysaria is kind of like, what's up with the dragon? But Rhaenyra, Laenor's not there. Sea Smoke's probably sad. 1 + 1 = 2. Like, come on, Rhaenyra. This guy needs a dragon rider. Come on.
Which, speaking of dragon riders, going back to King's Landing before we discuss Alicent, like that scene at the tavern with Ulf, like he's implying that he's a Targaryen bastard. He calls himself a dragon seed. So we know from season 1 that there's a bunch of bastards from Aegon, so there must be at least a couple more from previous monarchs.
So this guy, let's break this down here. This guy said he's the bastard son of Balon
the Brave. Yeah,
Balon the Brave. Who was Balon the Brave? Who was he the brother of? Was he the brother of the Jacaerys the Conciliator?
I think he was the son. Yeah, he was the son. He was, I believe, Balon was the father of Viserys and Daemon. That's why he says that. Like my brother, the king,
brother of the king. Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, I think that's. I don't think that's.
So he would basically be uncles to Aegon.
Yeah, to Aegon and Rhaenyra.
That's so weird.
Let me Google it real quick if it's like the actual, because there's like 2 brothers that die before.
Okay, but while you look that up, my question is this guy legit? He's in some drunken tavern. Okay. Talking to his friends.
I'm correct. Cool.
You're correct. So he's the uncle to. He's a brother of
Viserys and Daemon, allegedly.
Allegedly. I got so many sus vibes from this guy. I'm like, is he a cool guy? Is he trustworthy? I do like that he kind of supports Rhaenyra. Doesn't support Aegon. Why is that the case?
Maybe because he feels like Viserys named her the heir, and that was his brother. So like maybe even though he's like a bastard or allegedly a bastard, like he might have like a sense of like, I don't know, honor of like, oh, like this is the person that my brother appointed. Like that's the person that I'm gonna support. But I
It's
love like
fun.
the quick switch up as soon as like Aegon walks in.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Aegon walks on in.
he's like, oh, king.
whoa!
Oh, hail the king.
It's kind of like when Homelander walks in. You're like, hey, yo, hey, everything's cool. So yeah, that was a very funny switch up because he's just sitting there shitting on him, and his friends shut up too. They're like, oh, hey, Aegon, yeah, free drinks, yay. But it was funny because switching back to Aegon's POV here, Aegon once again is a character that wants love and acceptance from the people. Once he was worried he was kind of losing that from Laird, he comes in here and kind of like gets free drinks for the people so they can be on his side. Aegon is a character who isn't really getting that love or anything from his family, and he doesn't show it to his family either, to be fair. So it's very funny that once again, as we see, he's getting love from the average, the small folk, which, by the way, he also hired some people to the Kingsguard who aren't really fully Kingsguard as well. They're kind of like, hey, yeah, we're going to go to the brothels, get this guy wet, basically. And Aegon's like, didn't you guys sign an oath of chastity? They're all like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, like that's BS, basically. It's like, oh, these guys are some horrible people in the Kingsguard.
Yeah.
That Aegon just hired because they're cool with him and they're friends, whatever. But anyways, yeah, we get this whole scene with Ulf, and I couldn't tell if he's trustworthy or not. We'll see where that leads. I don't feel like he's going to be riding a dragon anytime soon, but I don't know what his purpose is yet. That has me very excited.
Yeah.
But also, this whole, now again, just to reference it again, the whole Aegon and Aemond scene was just heartbreaking for boy Aemond. But also, it's cool that he owned it as well in a way. Kind of like I felt bad for like the person he was sleeping with because he's just like, well, fuck me then.
Yeah.
But Aemond, he has to be a guy.
And also drives the point home that Aegon has always been the ringleader of any little group that he's in. Like Alicent, like in season 1, tried to blame Jace and Luke about how like Aemond was like bullied as a kid, but like Aegon was always like the ringleader of that little group. Like, it was always Aegon the one like involved of like the whole teasing of it all. So
exactly,
and it just continues here even as adults.
So that brotherly relationship, I cannot wait to track that moving forward as battles start to commence. But speaking of battles commencing, the final scene here in this episode is a great way to showcase how battles might not have to commence if the scene played out kind of differently. But
or earlier. Or earlier,
exactly. And it's a very interesting scene. On one hand, it's kind of like Rhaenyra going into the lion's den into King's Landing. It's very
goofy how she just like walks in like that's whole like very
dumb
like,
and goofy. Yeah,
it's very dumb. It's like it reminds me of like how like Tyrion just was like walking around King's Landing in season 7. But again, like at least in this case, I feel like the end result justifies how we get there.
Yeah, it's like that's usually the case with Game of Thrones, where it's like, remember them going beyond the wall with this, probably one of the worst plans in history, going beyond the wall to snatch a White Walker or whatever. But dumb plan, but it was made for some cool TV, and in this case, we got some great TV between Alicent and Rhaenyra, who are just once again Emma and Olivia Cook, fantastic performances. These two are unreal. I love them so much.
I love how like in a sense they're almost like trying to capture what Millie and Emily Carey were doing in season 1, like kind of like tapping into that like teenage girl relationship that they had for like a split second. I think they did really good while playing that.
I agree. There's like that yearning for the past, this nostalgic yearning of what they once had. But
not even that, but also like the comedy that comes out of it, like, oh, like what was your plan? Just like sneak in, kill me or whatever. And I was like, yeah, well, I don't know. It's like, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I didn't. If Rhaenyra was honest to be like, I didn't think that far ahead. Like if you scream, I'll kill you, and then they'll probably kill me too. So like mutually assured destruction. Don't do that, please. It's again great comedy that came out of this interaction. But yeah, I think the big name of the game for this episode and for this conversation is inevitability, and how these personal conflicts made it to be inevitable. Where from Alicent's perspective, her finally delving into the truth of that night, which has always been a contentious night, not only for the characters, but also for like the fans of the show, House of the Dragon, who are kind of like, this all started because of some BS Aegon whisper, and that's what really fueled Alicent.
Yeah, like a misunderstanding. And like for me, like I always
that was
read,
so contrived.
yeah, I always read that as like Alicent heard what she wanted to hear. It wasn't like a matter of like, oh, I got confused or whatever. I mean, there's some part of it, obviously, but yeah, like I think it was always about like her hearing what she wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly. So her hearing what she wanted to hear, her going the path that I don't want to say Alicent started this path, because it was clear, again, in season 1, that regardless of what Alicent heard that night, Otto and the men in her life were already going to do it. Alicent was just part of the route, and that gave them, the Aegon Whisper, gave them more
the green light.
Objective green light, objective fuel, even though it's not objectively, it's objectively false. From our
even Otto knows that it's false. Last week he was like, "Oh yeah, you think your dad named you king?"
Great point. Exactly. So that makes it so interesting here when Alicent finally delves into that past, and you can see the look on Rhaenyra's face when she's like, "Tell me what words again? Prince that was promised." Bruh, that was the story.
Yeah, and I love that for a split second she doubts herself. She starts to believe Alicent, like, oh, like maybe he did change his mind, and she like starts like tearing up. But as soon as she hears like the Prince of Promise, like, oh, you fucking idiot,
out the window. And you can't blame Alicent, because Alicent never got that knowledge, but Rhaenyra did. Yeah. But what can she say? It's like, oh, that was the story that she told about Aegon the Conqueror, and I love the added repetition that Alicent does. Like when Rhaenyra says, like, it was Aegon the Conqueror, not your Aegon, basically. And Alicent says, Aegon the Conqueror. It's kind of like she's repeating it, but just like, it's funny in a sense that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're too far gone. Alicent realizes that. Because she's like, oh, Aegon the Conqueror. I think in her mind when she repeats that, she's like, you could be right, Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
But also, it doesn't matter, Rhaenyra.
Yeah, and I also love like the fact that I think this might be the first time where Alicent might accept or know more than Rhaenyra in a sense, because like Alicent knows that there's nothing that she can do, even if she went and ran to the council and it's like, hey, this is what Viserys actually meant. They're like gonna be like, okay, and like we're already too deep into this shit.
And that's what made it so painful to watch. Because I think Olivia played that so well.
Yeah, and then you have Rhaenyra still like, oh no, but like you could still do something about it. And Alicent's like, no, like there's nothing that can be done. But I also love this conversation that they have, because like I think this is finally confirmation for Rhaenyra that she actually does have to do something about it. Like she actually has to go to war, because it's not just about the Iron Throne. It's confirmation that Viserys believed in her, because essentially what Viserys was telling Alicent in his last moments alive, the night before he walks into the throne room and like declares his support for Rhaenyra, like Rhaenyra goes up to him and during the night, and he's like, oh, do you still believe in me? Do you still believe that I can be the one who fulfills this prophecy? And like he never answers it, but like knowing that he answer not to Rhaenyra but to Alicent is like, okay, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than this feud between families. I actually have to do something about it. And it seems again from the trailer for next week's episode that she's having like a conversation maybe with Jace about it. She's talking about like, oh, this is bigger than us. So she might finally be telling somebody else the secret of House Targaryen. I don't know.
Yeah. And Jace is like, oh, that's what the Stark boy was telling me.
But yeah, like I love that whole chain of events.
That's a great point to look at as well. Like, because I was looking at it from like Alicent's sad, like there's nothing she can do side of it all. But from Rhaenyra, she gets the, in a positive sense, she gets the validation to push through with this conflict that she didn't really want, but she now realizes through this validation that this conflict and this conversation, that this conflict is happening And it's much more than a petty squabble for herself to get the throne that she deserves.
Yeah.
This is much more for not only herself and her right to the throne, but this validation makes it so that it's much more bigger. It's for the dynasty of the Targaryens as a whole.
And it's almost also like a way for her to have closure with the death of her father with Viserys, because again, like, this is a message that was meant for her, and she never got to have that final conversation with Viserys. So like, again, even though she doesn't have like the physical discussion with him, like through Alicent, for better or worse, she finally gets closure on that. So yeah.
Which was you're right, she gets closure to this beautiful, complicated arc. And I would have much more insight of it all if I rewatched season 1, but one of the major points and dynamics of season 1 was that complicated relationship between Rhaenyra and her father. And I loved following that all throughout season 1. Again, I referenced the best episode of the season with the whole dinner scene. But it's just her and her father really having this truly complicated relationship, much more complicated when she started, when the series started dating Alicent. But throughout of it all, he always had faith in her. And to get this closure from her father on a personal level, like you said, was always so important. And it really ties up one of the most beautiful arcs that House of the Dragon has set up in season 1. And now it's going to continue with her and her son and Jace next week, hopefully. So it's very cool. And again, that's why this show rocks, guys. Like, the personal closures, the personal conflicts is what creates these macro big war and battles and conflicts that are coming no matter what people can say to each other. It's too late to do anything else. And that's mostly because not of these personal conflicts, but also because of the setting that they live in. These men that we saw throughout this episode that are, outside of Alicent's control and that Rhaenyra has control over, like, these people are really thirsty for battle. And I think finally, 3 episodes in, we're finally going to see the first spark of battle next week as war commences. Overall, a really good, a really strong episode. A lot of character movements and shakeups.
Ready for a big battle next week, which I was looking because I remember they had posted like the run times for the first couple episodes, and next week's is like the shortest one. And I'm like,
really?
Yeah, it's like 50 minutes or something. Like, every episode so far has been like an hour at least.
An hour and 5, yeah. So, yeah, short episode, but you know what we say about short episodes, guys. They're going to be filled with meat and a lot of battle. So, but the best battles of Game of Thrones are ones that have awesome set pieces. Of course, that is always going to be a consistent thing. But I'm looking forward to what are the big character moments within these battles? What's going to happen? At least checking the list for next week. I'm excited to see what Aemond is going to bring to this battle. Last time he was on Vhagar, shit happened. So
didn't go well.
Didn't go well at all. So we'll see what happens this time. Who's going to be the Dragon Rider? Like, we have Baela on our side. I'm not lost for words.
Busy over there at the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah, Damon's Overlook Hotel. Are we going to get more? Are we going to get a tease of more Daemon next week? Or are they just going to ignore Daemon next week? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But are we going to see Baela's dragon versus Vhagar? How many dragons are going to go up against Vhagar? Is it going to be a wipeout? Or is the Blacks going to lose this first fight?
Yeah.
Because Vhagar is like, how do you defeat Vhagar? Edgar, what's going to happen? So yeah, Gawain. What's going to happen to Gawain? He's going to get a big taste, for battle. Is he going to die? Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited. All these people we talked about have been eager for battle. They're finally going to get it. Is this going to change a lot of their minds or is it going to reinforce their minds? So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, this was a good episode. You guys can find me on Twitter, Harris EV9. Once again, having a great time doing these House of the Dragon episodes. Crazy, guys. This was our 3rd episode. We're about to be 4 out of 7 or 8 episodes.
8, yeah.
8. So we're almost halfway through the season already. By the end of this month, July 1st now, as of this recording. By the end of this month, we'll be nearly done with House of the Dragon, which is so fucking sad. And then we have to write another probably 2 years.
I mean, didn't they say they're going to start maybe filming later this
year? They'll start filming at the end of this year, but that means like
maybe fall 2025 or
the end of next year at the earliest. So yeah,
at least we're getting a Night of the Second Kingdoms in between. But...
Exactly, and we'll be back. We'll definitely be doing Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, that's gonna be a very interesting show for them to pull off because it takes place after the dance. So it's gonna be interesting how like they talk about it, like talk around without like spoiling the main show that they have right now.
How long is it after the dance again? Is it like 107 years?
I think it might be like about 100 or less.
Okay.
Probably. So, yeah, because like it's closer to the Game of Thrones timeline than anything else.
So maybe they do, maybe they don't talk about it. You know, I think they won't. Because like, do we talk about World War II all the time in our life? Not that much anymore. But it's still important, right? It changed the course of history. So yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, again, find me Harris EV9 tomorrow. The Acolyte premieres. Nathan and I always do Acolyte reviews at the end of every week, usually Friday or Saturday. So if you like watching Star Wars' The Acolyte, I have thoughts about that every week. And we are continuing our Fox Marvel commentary. Last week, we watched X-Men Apocalypse. That was an experience. And this week, we are watching Logan, one of my not only favorite superhero movies ever, top 4, but it's one of the best movies of all time. So cannot wait to watch Logan again this week. So yeah, follow me for all my updates and podcasts.
Yeah, you can find this podcast at WHFG Podcast on YouTube. You can also like listen to it on any particular podcast platform that you like, Spotify or Apple or all the good stuff.
Ring the bell, guys. Make sure we go whenever we go live. Yeah,
like and subscribe. But yeah, and then you can find me at EDG or TEG on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, all the good stuff. You can find some of my written work at Loud and Clear Reviews and the Cinema Spot. I recently wrote a review for A Quiet Place Day 1. Have you seen it, by the way?
I've not seen it. I went out of town this weekend. I had to go to a baby shower in Milwaukee, which was very fun. But I'm finally seeing it tomorrow. I got to catch up on my movies. So I didn't see A Quiet Place. I didn't see Horizon. And I didn't see
The Exorcism
anime.
I did watch that. We'll talk about it in our monthly episode.
You saw Exorcism?
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
How? For free, hopefully. Shit.
Well, technically, yeah, for me it's free.
A-list motherfucker.
A-list motherfucker, yeah. So yeah, we'll be here next week covering episode 4, which I think the title is A Dance of Dragons. So that's exciting. And yeah, see you in a week, people. Bye-bye.